I thought I was giving a lifeline. Turns out I gave them a punchline. The living room was lit in golden hues, twinkling fairy lights wrapped around the windows, a fire flickering just enough to be festive. Everything looked perfect. Picture perfect, really. Like the kind of scene you'd find on a Hallmark card if you ignored the undercurrent of tension humming underneath the cinnamon candles and artificial smiles. I sat on the floor by the tree, cross-legged on the rug that still smelled faintly of pine and old fireplace ash. Brandon reached for my gift, a slim red envelope with his name written in gold ink. I'd taken extra care, even sealing it with a wax stamp because I knew he liked that sort of old-school touch. 3 months of rent, prepaid, transferred to his Venmo, and printed on a note inside. I thought it was practical. I thought it was generous. I thought, for once, I could be the sister who made life a little easier. He tore open the envelope with a dramatic flourish, then paused. His eyebrows rose. "Oh, wow," he said, voice already curving upward with amusement. "Did I just win a scholarship or a stimulus check?" A few laughs erupted. Janice, my mother, chuckled the way she did when she wasn't sure if something was funny or rude, but was too tired to scold either way. David, my father, smiled behind the rim of his wine glass like he was proud of Brandon for, what, being clever? "It's rent, 3 months," I said. "You mentioned you were struggling." "Struggling, yeah?" He smirked. But I didn't know Santa had a 401k. The room burst into louder laughter this time. One of my cousins clapped him on the back. "Damn, Rachel. You investing in family portfolios now?" I froze. The envelope slipped from his hand and landed between us on the rug, open and weightless. I looked at Janice, hoping for even a hint of discomfort on her face. A frown, maybe, or a glance that said, "That's enough." But she just shook her head slightly, smiling, and said, "Honey, you know how Brandon is. He jokes." And David, still sipping his drink, added, "It's just his way of saying thank you." No one noticed my silence as anything more than awkwardness. They kept opening gifts, trading jabs, nudging each other with smirks as if I were part of the joke. Maybe I was. Maybe I had always been. That thought, sticky and sharp, settled in the base of my throat. "I'll take that back," I said quietly, reaching for the envelope and slipping it into my coat pocket. "Good to know." The air didn't shift. No one paused. Brandon just shrugged. "Fine, guess I'll apply for FAFSA." I stood up. "I'm going to head out," I announced, my voice even. I didn't wait for the fake protests, "Oh, come on, don't be so sensitive," or "At least stay for dessert." No one really said anything anyway. The door clicked shut behind me with a finality that no one inside seemed to notice. Outside, the air bit at my skin, crisp and clean in a way the house had never been. I walked to the car, the snow crunching beneath my boots. Claire was waiting, FaceTime open on the dash. Her face lit up the screen, eyebrows raised. "How'd it go?" I stared out the window. The house behind me stood like a postcard. Warm lights, laughter echoing faintly, but cold as a museum in my mind. "Let's just go home." Silence wasn't revenge. It was the only thing left that didn't cost me money. The apartment felt colder than usual, though the thermostat glowed at a steady 72. Maybe it was the emptiness that made everything feel brittle. Christmas lights still blinked along the windowsill, faintly flickering in rhythmic loops like they hadn't gotten the memo that the holiday was over. Or maybe they had. And this was their way of dying slowly, just like my patience. I sat on the couch wrapped in a blanket I didn't need. Claire curled next to me, her hand resting on my thigh in quiet solidarity. Outside, a delivery truck beeped in reverse. Inside, the only sound was the occasional crackle from the candle I'd forgotten to blow out and the buzz of my phone on the coffee table. Again. Another message. Probably Janice. Maybe Brandon. Definitely not worth reading. Claire glanced at the screen. "You going to answer?" I shook my head. She didn't ask again. That was something I loved about her. She didn't try to fix me with words. She gave me room to be a mess without making it her project. I stared at the blinking lights, remembering when they used to make me feel warm. As a kid, I used to think Christmas meant safety. Everyone came together, everyone belonged. But somewhere along the way, the warmth turned to weight. I was never just Rachel. I was responsible Rachel. Successful Rachel. Rachel who always handled it. It hadn't started this year, not even last year. I remembered the fall of 2021 when Brandon had called crying because financial aid didn't cover his tuition. Janice was already overwhelmed with credit card debt, and David said he made his bed. So I made his bed for him, quietly wired the money, covered it all, told Brandon it was a scholarship that had come through late. He never asked questions, just accepted, like he always did. I didn't get a thank you. I didn't expect one. I had trained myself to think gratitude was optional. That love meant fixing everything before anyone else noticed it was broken. But last night, for the first time, I realized they weren't just oblivious. They were comfortable. Comfortable making me the punchline. Comfortable watching me disappear. You're always so sensitive, Rachel. That sentence had chased me through every room I'd ever sat in with them. It was how they cleaned up every jab, every cold shoulder, every forgotten birthday. They labeled me fragile to justify their carelessness. Claire squeezed my leg gently. You don't have to keep earning your place. I wanted to believe her. I really did. But the reflex was still there. Some part of me whispering, if you just try a little harder, they'll see you. They'll love you the way you love them. The phone buzzed again. A preview popped up. Janice. Are you seriously still upset? Brandon was joking. Don't make this a thing. My thumb hovered over the screen. Brandon. Lamau, delete the Venmo if you're gonna act like this. Claire didn't say anything. She didn't have to. I scrolled up to the top of the group chat. Family unit. And without hesitation, I hit delete. No confirmation, no drama, just gone. It felt quiet. Not peaceful, not yet. But cleaner. Like the moment right after a storm when the air smells like wet cement and something sharp. I leaned back into the couch and let the silence settle into my bones. Claire turned her face toward mine, brushing her lips against my temple. You don't owe anyone your peace. I didn't answer. I just nodded and kept staring at the lights blinking out one by one. When they can't withdraw money, they try to withdraw guilt. The kettle clicked off with a soft ping, but I didn't move. Steam curled from the spout, drifting toward the ceiling like a ghost, thin and persistent. Outside the kitchen window, the wind rattled the glass in quick, bitter bursts. December 30th, the final stretch. A year I had entered exhausted and would leave scorched. Claire had gone silent beside me, nursing her own cup of tea. The Christmas lights were finally down. Only the faint pine scent from the dying wreath on the door remained. We hadn't talked much since I deleted the family chat. She didn't press, didn't poke, just stayed near. My phone buzzed on the counter, screen lighting up with a familiar name. Dad. I didn't answer. It went to voicemail after 3 rings. I let it sit. A minute later, a notification popped up. 1 new voicemail. I stared at it a while before pressing play, putting it on speaker so Claire could hear too. Because somehow, this already felt like something we'd have to grieve together. David's voice was casual. Too casual. Like he'd rehearsed sounding calm. Hey, Rach. Hope your Christmas was fine. So, listen, your mom mentioned you've been a little distant. I just wanted to say, well, it's not a big thing, but the Camry's having trouble. Transmission, I think. Shop said it'll run me about $3,000. I wouldn't ask if it wasn't urgent, you know? I know you've got things going well with your firm. Anyway, I'd appreciate the help. Call me back. He ended with a short chuckle. Like it was a joke. Like I was still supposed to laugh along. Claire looked up from her mug, eyebrows raised. I didn't say anything. Just walked to the table, set my phone down, and opened my laptop. The second I signed in, a new email notification flashed. Subject: Please don't forget what matters. From Janice Time, 9:07 a.m. I clicked. He's your father, Rachel. He's not asking for a handout. He's asking for help. You know how hard it's been for him lately, and we all know you're in a position to assist. Have some heart. The last line clanged like a bell in my chest. Have some heart. As if I'd been heartless all these years. As if all the silent sacrifices, tuition payments, credit card debt I'd paid off as a Christmas surprise. The constant emotional labor meant nothing. As if kindness was only real when it came with a receipt. I reread the email. Then the voicemail again. Claire spoke softly. You don't have to do this. I nodded slowly. Not in agreement, not yet. Just in recognition. I took a deep breath and finally opened a reply window. My fingers hovered over the keys for longer than they should have. Saying no felt unnatural, like writing with my left hand. But then I typed it. Number just that. One word. One line. I read it 5 times before hitting send. The second it left my screen, I exhaled. Not relief exactly. More like release. A string snapping inside me that had been pulled taut for years. I stood up from the table and walked to the window. The city looked gray and brittle. Streetlights flickered against pavement soaked in freezing drizzle. I whispered to no one. Happy New Year to me. The buzz came instantly. My phone vibrated so violently it nearly slid off the counter. A new message from Janice, the subject line already a slap. You'll regret turning your back on your own blood. I didn't open it. I didn't need to. I just closed the laptop, poured another cup of coffee, and sat down again. This time across from Claire, who watched me not with worry, but pride. Outside, the wind howled, but inside, something quiet and solid took root. I had said no, and the world hadn't ended. ChatGPT John Noi, Ho Kung Ngetoi Hitoi, Noi Ko Trong Hyonam. But suddenly, no echoed like a gunshot. The knock came just after lunch. 3 sharp raps, the kind that pretend to be polite. Claire looked up from the couch, startled. I froze halfway through rinsing my mug. I hadn't ordered anything. No one was supposed to be here. The peephole showed exactly who I dreaded. David. He wasn't even trying to look casual. His hair was mussed, jacket barely zipped, and he was holding a manila envelope like it was some sort of prop. I opened the door just a crack, keeping the chain in place. Dad? His face twitched into an imitation of warmth. Rach, good. You're home. I didn't move. What are you doing here? He shifted his weight, looking down at his shoes like he'd practiced this part. I didn't want to text. It's your mom. She's not well. Some scans. They think it might be, well, we don't know yet. But the hospital bills are already piling up. It's a lot, Rachel. We need about $8,000 just to get through the next round. There was a pause, almost comical in its length, before he added, Please? Claire stood behind me now, silent but close. Her presence felt like armor. Do you have documentation? I asked, voice flat. Receipts, diagnosis, anything? David blinked. It's all moving so fast. We haven't had time to get everything printed. I stepped back, still behind the locked chain. Email it to me. What? If Mom's sick, I'm sorry, but I'm not handing over money without proof. You want help? Show me something real. His face crumpled, not into grief, but offense, like I just insulted the concept of motherhood itself. Claire's voice cut in, low and calm, but sharp as frost. You had years, David. Years when Rachel said yes to everything. Don't cry broke now just because she finally drew a line. He turned his gaze toward her, mouth tightening. You don't get to talk. You're not even family. And yet, Claire said, I've done more for Rachel's peace than you ever have. David stepped forward. Too fast, Too loud. I slammed the door shut instinctively, heart pounding. He pounded the other side with his fist. Open this damn door. You think you're better than us now? Just because you make some money? You think you're too good for your own parents? His voice bounced off the hallway walls. I heard a door creak open across the hall. Our neighbor, Mr. Albright, stepped out in slippers, squinting toward the noise. Claire looked at me, silently asking if I wanted to call the police. I opened the door again, just the latch between us. Then, louder than I thought possible, I said, "You raised me on guilt. I'm done being its landlord." The silence that followed was instant and electric. David stared at me for a few seconds, as if he didn't recognize who he was looking at. Then, without a word, he turned and walked down the hall, footsteps uneven, hands shaking as he shoved the elevator button with too much force. I closed the door and locked it. Deadbolt, chain, and the small latch near the bottom. Then I slid to the floor, pulse thudding in my ears. Claire knelt beside me, wrapping an arm around my shoulder. "You okay?" I nodded. I think I finally said it. The rest of the day passed in a kind of muted haze. I tried to work but couldn't focus. Tried to nap, but my body buzzed with adrenaline. Evening fell like a heavy curtain, and by the time I remembered to check my phone, there were 12 notifications. One stood out. A GoFundMe link from Janice. Title: Help Us Survive a Daughter's Betrayal. I clicked, even though I knew I shouldn't. They'd written a whole story about how I'd abandoned them, left them with nothing in their time of greatest need. It was full of half-truths and outright lies, polished into something pitiful and venomous. They'd even uploaded a photo of the old house with a caption that read, "We gave her everything." Claire appeared beside me, reading over my shoulder. "They're fundraising off your boundaries." I stared at the screen, numb. The donate button blinked, cheerful and cruel. I closed the browser. Not out of denial, but out of resolve. They wanted me to break. They wanted to shame me back into silence. But I wasn't bleeding anymore. And they weren't my landlords either. The only thing I ever wanted from them was to feel seen. Not needed. Just seen. The Whitman house looked like something out of a magazine. But not the sleek, glossy kind. This was the kind with scuffed wooden floors and knotted quilts, with hand-drawn kid art on the fridge and a coat rack that always had one jacket slipping off. Warm light spilled from every corner, and the smell, something between cinnamon, butter, and sage, wrapped around me like a second skin. A fire crackled in the living room, and someone's laughter echoed down the hall. Claire squeezed my hand as she nudged open the front door. "You okay?" I wasn't, but I nodded. I'd been dreading this. Not because of her family, they were kind, if a little too curious, but because I didn't know who I was in a space where no one expected anything from me. "You're just here to be," Claire had said, smiling. "No performances." It was easy for her to say. She'd grown up in rooms like this, with people who asked questions like, "How's your heart?" instead of "How much are you making now?" Her mother, Jean, greeted us at the door in a flour-dusted apron, immediately pulling Claire into a hug and then me. Just as long, just as warm. "You made it in time. Martha's pecan pie is almost ready, and your cousin Sadie's trying to sneak bites of the dough again." I laughed, too quick, too light. "Sounds perfect." "It's chaos," Jean said with a wink, "but it's our kind." Inside, every room hummed with gentle noise. No yelling, no whispered corners, no power plays, just people who genuinely wanted to be in the same space. I spent the first hour observing. Claire's uncle showed me how he smoked ribs. Her cousin bragged about a school play. Someone's toddler crawled into my lap like I belonged. No one asked about my job or if I was helping out my parents. No one looked at me like a resource. They looked at me like me. It was disorienting. At dinner, we sat around the kitchen table, all elbows and mismatched napkins. Claire's dad passed me a slice of pie with a generous dollop of cream on top. "First time's a big deal," he said with a grin. Nobody's keeping score here, but if you don't have seconds, we might worry. Something cracked inside me. Not visibly, not yet. But the shift was seismic. Thanks, I murmured, unsure what to do with the warmth rising in my chest. Later, while Claire helped her aunt in the kitchen, I slipped away. I didn't mean to cry. I just needed a quiet place, and found it in the pantry. The door clicked shut behind me, and I leaned against the shelves, breathing in the scent of dried herbs and flour and the unmistakable sting of tears. They weren't loud, just steady, like a leak I hadn't noticed until now. So many years I'd been told love meant giving. That silence was gratitude. That presence was enough. And here, in this house full of noise and questions and actual joy, I realized I had never once just been accepted without needing to do something to deserve it. The door opened slowly. Claire stepped in, found me mid-silent sob. "Oh, babe," she whispered, wrapping her arms around me from behind. "You okay?" I laughed into her shirt, shaking my head. "I don't know. This is weird." "Good weird?" I nodded. She rested her chin on my shoulder. "You don't have to earn your spot here. You already belong." It took everything in me not to break completely at that. Later that night, curled on the guest bed in Claire's old room, I checked my phone. A single message blinked. Brandon. Saw that GoFundMe got traction. Thanks for nothing. I stared at the words, waiting for them to hurt, waiting for guilt to creep in. It didn't. Not the way it used to. I clicked the message, pressed archive, and turned back toward Claire, who was already reaching for my hand in her sleep. ChatGPT, John Noi. Turns out, mot jolako. The noi moi thutoi chuabao gyo noi ra. The morning sky outside the apartment window was the color of wet ash. Gray, static, and empty. It hadn't snowed, but the air carried the kind of chill that seemed to gnaw through drywall. I hadn't left the house all day. I barely left the couch. My inbox was flooded. Half of it was junk. The other half was more refined junk. Emails forwarded from extended family, a few old high school friends, even one from a college professor I hadn't heard from in years. I saw the GoFundMe. Is everything okay with your parents? Not taking sides, but maybe this is just a misunderstanding. I'm sure your mom meant well. No one ever said that about me. No one ever gave me the benefit of the doubt. Just them. Claire handed me coffee and sat beside me, cross-legged on the couch. Her silence wasn't heavy. It was deliberate, spacious, like she was leaving room for me to break the silence first, but not pressuring me to. I clicked the link again. The fundraiser now had over $6,000. No names were mentioned explicitly, but the story was clear. A daughter gone cold, elderly parents abandoned, unexpected medical needs, heartbreak. There was a photo. David looking sullen in a hospital hallway. Janice holding his hand, lips tight, eyes glassy. What wasn't shown? The years I paid their bills. The credit cards I maxed out to cover Brandon's tuition when the school threatened to revoke his schedule. The $18,000 that vanished in 2021 without so much as a thank you. I closed my eyes and remembered it. The night he called, frantic and dramatic. They said they'll pull me from class next week, Rachel. I can't lose this semester. I'll never recover. And I'd believed him. Because I always did. I didn't tell anyone. Just wired the money. I was working overtime then. 2 jobs, barely sleeping. But I did it. Quietly. Like everything else. And now I was the villain in their bedtime story. I scrolled down on the GoFundMe page, hovering over the Donate Now button. Claire tilted her head, curious. "What are you doing?" she asked gently. "Sending a message," I said. She watched me type in the amount. $1. In the note field I wrote, "From the selfish daughter. Good luck with the optics." Claire read it. Her lips twitched, half disbelief, half admiration. "You sure?" she asked. I looked her dead in the eye. No more hiding. I hit donate. The confirmation page popped up. Done. We sat there in silence, the cursor blinking on an empty screen, like a pulse that had finally steadied. My phone buzzed. A new message from Brandon. Guess you think that was funny. You're pathetic. Don't worry. Everyone sees what kind of person you are now. I blocked the number without replying. The action felt clean, not triumphant, just necessary. Later that evening, while folding laundry, my voicemail icon lit up. Janice. I didn't even need to press play. Her voice spilled through the speaker anyway, brittle and piercing, laced with that signature cocktail of disappointment and control. I didn't raise you to be cold, Rachel. I don't know what's gotten into you lately, but this isn't how we treat family. Not after everything we did for... I hit delete. No second thought. No flinch. Just a tap. That night, Claire cooked pasta. I lit a candle just because. We didn't talk about family. We didn't talk about GoFundMe pages or blocked numbers or the silence I'd kept folded inside me for years. Instead, I let myself laugh at a stupid joke she made about overcooked noodles. I wore fuzzy socks and left my phone on silent. For the first time in months, maybe years, I slept without dreaming about owing anyone anything. And that $1, it bought me more than peace. It bought me back. My family didn't just sell me out. They turned my silence into a storyline. The notification bell hadn't stopped ringing in days. Every time I opened my phone, there was something new. A tag I didn't expect. A comment I didn't want. A vague status update that felt like it had been written in blood, just subtle enough to pass as not about you. But everyone knew it was. Claire sat next to me on the couch, flipping through her own feed. I could see it in her face before she spoke. Tight jaw, furrowed brow. They're turning it into a pity campaign, she said, scrolling. Like, full-on PR mode. I already knew. I'd seen the same GoFundMe reposted by 2 different cousins I hadn't spoken to in 5 years. One of them captioned it. Hard times can hit anyone, even good parents. Let's rally together. Good parents. Another post, this one from Janice's personal Facebook. You give everything to your children, and one day they act like you're disposable. The likes poured in. Hearts, hugs, crying face emojis. There was a photo attached to that one, too. A throwback of me at 5, sitting on David's lap at a carnival, holding cotton candy. It looked sweet, innocent, like something worth saving. But it wasn't theirs to use like that. I turned off the screen and leaned back on the couch. The window outside showed a night sky too dark for stars. The room felt smaller than usual. Or maybe I did. Claire broke the silence. You should say something. Set the record straight. I stared at her. And what? Write a rebuttal post? Have a comment war with my own mother? She didn't reply. She didn't need to. The hurt in her eyes said enough. But I wasn't ready to get dragged into the ring. Not on their terms. They want me to defend myself, I said softly. But I'm done playing that game. Let them write the story. I turned to her fully now. I'll write my own ending. And I meant it. Later that night, I pulled out the old leather journal Claire had given me 2 birthdays ago. I'd barely used it, saving it for something important. Turns out, it was tonight. I sat by the window with a blanket over my legs and a pen in my hand. The first few lines came slowly. Then they poured out like a dam cracking open. Dear Rachel, age 12. You're trying so hard, I know. You think if you just get the right grades, say the right thing, offer enough, you'll finally stop being invisible. You'll finally matter. But you're not invisible because you're unworthy. You're invisible because they only see what they can use. One day, you'll learn that love isn't a trade. It doesn't demand receipts. You don't owe them your future. You don't owe them your body, your money, your quiet. You are not their lifeboat. And even if they sink, that's not your fault. Love, Rachel, who finally stopped swimming for them. I looked up, blinking back tears I hadn't expected. Claire knelt in front of me, eyes soft, fingers brushing my wrist. "Can you read it?" she asked. So I did. By the time I finished, the candle beside us had burned low, casting long shadows on the wall. Neither of us spoke for a moment. Then Claire whispered, "That's the story people should hear." I nodded. "Maybe one day." Just as I set the journal down, my phone buzzed again. A message from an old coworker, someone from a job I'd left years ago. "Hey, your name's not in that GoFundMe by any chance, is it?" Asking 'cause, well, someone tagged me and I recognized the tone. I didn't respond right away. I just stared at the screen, that strange cocktail of shame and resolve bubbling inside. Maybe I wouldn't fight their fire with fire, but I could make sure their smoke didn't choke me. Some homes keep score, some just keep the door open. The cabin was tucked between two ridgelines like a secret. Pine needles blanketed the frozen ground, and the snow clung to the wooden eaves like icing on a gingerbread house. When we arrived, our boots crunched against the icy gravel, and I was greeted not with silence or a critical once-over, but a flurry of warmth. Laughter spilled from the porch as Claire's younger sister, Ellie, waved us inside with both arms, her cheeks rosy from the cold. Inside, the heat from the fireplace hit me like a blanket I didn't know I needed. The whole place smelled like cinnamon, coffee, and something savory baking in the oven. Claire's mom was in the kitchen, humming as she stirred a pot. Uncle Dan was building a fire for the second time that day. Not because it was out, but because he liked getting it just right. Claire's dad offered me a mug of cider before I even had time to unlace my boots. No one asked how much rent I paid or what job title I held. No one asked how often I called my mother. They asked what I was reading lately, whether I preferred coffee or tea, if I liked dogs. Simple things. We played board games that night. Ellie obliterated us in Scrabble with a triple-word score using quixotic. Claire's parents laughed loud and often. At one point, Claire kissed me on the forehead mid-game and nobody flinched. Nobody looked away. It wasn't a test. It was just life. Later, while helping Claire's mom dry dishes, she pulled a small gift bag from the pantry. "I saw this the other week and thought of you," she said, placing it on the counter. Inside was a hand-woven wool scarf, rich green with tiny flecks of copper. Software deliberate. My throat tightened instantly. I tried to mask it with a smile, but my voice cracked. "Thank you." She touched my shoulder gently. "It's nothing big, just warmth." But it was everything. Back home, my old home, every gesture came with a receipt. Even love, especially love. David used to remind us, every holiday dinner, this turkey didn't cook itself, you know. Janice would follow with, "At least pretend to appreciate it. We worked all week." And then the sighs, the glances, the muttered remarks about effort going unnoticed. Here, warmth was offered without tally marks. Food was shared, not calculated. Hugs were given freely, not earned. That night, I sat by the fire with Ellie. She was younger, maybe 22, still in school. We talked about books and podcasts, then about families. She asked gently what mine was like. I hesitated, then said, "Structured." She raised an eyebrow. "Like a tax code?" I laughed. "A real one." She smiled. "You're easier to love than you think," she said without looking away. I stared at the flames, trying not to cry in front of someone who hadn't done anything to deserve the weight of my history. But something in her voice, the clarity, the kindness, slipped past the armor. Later that night, long after everyone had gone to bed, I sat curled up on the couch with my phone. One voicemail remained, saved and untouched for weeks. Janice's voice, brittle and theatrical. "I don't know who filled your head with these ideas, but we were always there for you, Rachel. Always. I just hope one day you realize what you're throwing away." I had held onto it like a splinter. Small, irritating, but somehow comforting in its familiarity. But I wasn't the same person who listened to it the first time, or the 5th, or the 50th. I tapped the screen. Delete. Gone. The silence that followed didn't scare me. It felt earned. Claire stirred in the bedroom and called softly, "You okay?" I smiled at the ceiling. "Yeah, I am." The next morning, with sun bleeding gently through the trees, I checked my email before breakfast. One new message. From Brandon Reynolds. Subject, emergency. Please, I didn't open it. I just closed my phone, poured myself a cup of coffee, and joined the family by the fire. Every emergency had my name written on the invoice. The subject line had a certain urgency to it. Dad collapsed. Please help. But it was the name in the from field that made my stomach twist. Brandon. I hovered for a second before clicking. The body of the email was short, sharp, and unapologetic. Rachel, Dad's in the hospital. It's serious. Mom is falling apart. We need $5,000 fast to cover the deductible. I know things have been tense, but this is family. Please. Brandon. No apology, no acknowledgement. Just another invoice disguised as an emergency. Another fire they expected me to put out, with my own hands and money. I didn't respond. Not right away. Instead, I closed the tab and stared at my reflection in the dark screen of my laptop. The lines in my face, the tightness around my eyes. I didn't look angry. I looked exhausted. I went to work that morning on autopilot. The office was a blur of neutral tones and predictable chatter. I smiled when I had to, nodded when necessary, but inside something was folding in on itself. During my lunch break, I ducked into a corner coffee shop, the kind with peeling walls and too much cinnamon in the air. I found a spot by the window, pulled out my phone, and typed in Brandon's name. My finger hovered over the screen again. I wasn't angry. I wasn't bitter. I was just done. Reply. This stops here. Don't contact me again. I hit send. No subject line. No greeting. No explanation. Just the truth. Just the end. Before I could process what I'd done, my phone buzzed again. This time, a message from Lindsay, an old mutual friend from college. Hey, not sure if you've heard, but Brandon's been messaging a bunch of us asking for money. Something about your dad in the hospital? You okay? I stared at her words. A wave of nausea rose in my throat. Not because I believed Brandon, but because I realized just how far he was willing to spread the net. Casting sympathy like bait. Claire walked into the shop a few minutes later. She didn't ask why I looked like I hadn't blinked in 20 minutes. She just sat beside me and placed a hot cocoa on the table. With extra marshmallows, she said. The smell hit me first, sweet and thick. Then the warmth of the cup in my hands. Then the tears. I didn't cry from guilt. Not this time. I cried from the ache of letting go, from finally breaking the loop that had strangled me for years. Claire reached over and placed her hand on mine. It's okay to grieve the version of them you needed but never got. I nodded, unable to speak, letting the tears fall freely now. The coffee shop bustled around us, people placing orders, spoons clinking, soft music humming. But in my little corner, time slowed. When we got home, I opened my phone one last time. One final, deliberate act. I blocked Brandon, then Janice, then David. I deleted the old group chat that still lived like a ghost in my messages. I scrolled through every saved number, every shared contact, and wiped them clean. It felt surgical, clean, necessary. And then I breathed. A real breath, one that didn't carry the weight of other people's expectations. I looked at Claire across the room. She was reading, legs tucked beneath her, glasses low on her nose. When she looked up and saw my face, she didn't ask what I had done. She just smiled. Feels lighter, doesn't it? I smiled back. Later that evening, as I was folding laundry, an email popped up. Not from anyone in my past, but my possible future. From Ben Whitman. Subject opportunity. Hey Rachel, I mentioned your name to a colleague at the firm. She loved your portfolio. Are you free to chat next week about a consulting project? Flexible hours, great team. Thought of you immediately. I sat on the bed, rereading the message, the corners of my mouth tugging upward. No strings, no manipulation. Just a door opening, one I wanted to walk through. I closed the laptop gently, turned off the lamp, and curled beside Claire. For once, sleep came easy. Some goodbyes are too heavy for words, so you carry them in silence. It had taken her 3 hours and a half glass of wine to write 13 words. Rachel stared at the blinking cursor on her laptop screen, the soft glow of the screen casting a halo over her keyboard. Sometimes peace comes at the cost of silence. I paid in full. I'm finally home. She read it again, slowly, thoughtfully. No names, no accusations, no explanations. Just the truth. Claire walked into the room quietly, holding 2 plates of dinner. Rosemary chicken, mashed sweet potatoes, and sautéed kale. The kind of meal that felt nourishing without being loud. She placed one in front of Rachel and peeked over her shoulder. "That's the Post?" Claire asked. Rachel nodded. "It doesn't say much." Claire leaned in and kissed the top of her head. "That's what makes it say everything." With one final exhale, Rachel hit Post. The screen refreshed, her name appearing at the top, followed by those 13 words. And just beneath that, 1 like, then 2, then 8, then 35. Small hearts and thumbs up emojis began to pepper the post like soft raindrops. Then came the comments. Ben Whitman. Damn, that hit. Sandra P. You don't have to explain anything. Proud of you. Anonymous cousin. Some people just love playing victim, huh? Claire Whitman. Rachel raised an eyebrow at the passive-aggressive jab from the anonymous cousin, clearly posted under a burner account or maybe one of the second cousins who had once asked her to co-sign a car loan. She hovered over it for a moment, then let it be. Let them stew. Do you want me to clap back? Claire offered, already opening her own phone. No, Rachel said softly, sipping her wine. Let them talk. They've always had the louder voice. I just don't need it anymore. The snow had started to fall outside. Thick, gentle flakes that melted on contact with the window pane but still gave the illusion of softness blanketing the world. The apartment was warm. Soft jazz playing from the speakers, candles flickering on the table, and the scent of rosemary clinging to the air. Rachel took a bite of chicken and savored the silence. For once, it didn't feel like absence. It felt like arrival. Her phone buzzed. She picked it up to find a message from Ben Whitman. I might have something that fits your voice better than your past ever did. You open to a change of scene? She smiled. The wine warmed her chest, or maybe it was the idea of finally stepping into something of her own. No more borrowed purpose, no more emotional invoices. She typed without hesitation. Rachel, let's talk Monday. She set the phone down, leaned back in her chair, and looked across the table at Claire, who was already pouring a second glass of wine. To new chapters, Claire toasted. To finally writing my own, Rachel replied. Outside, the world kept spinning, but inside, a quiet had settled. And this time, it felt like peace. For the first time, someone wanted my voice for what it held, not what it could fund. The elevator hummed as it climbed. Rachel watched the numbers blink overhead, one by one, each floor bringing her closer to something she couldn't quite name yet. Nerves fluttered in her chest like moths. She smoothed the front of her blazer with clammy palms and glanced at her reflection in the mirrored walls. Not perfect, but solid. Still here. The doors opened to a lobby flooded with sunlight. Glass, marble, and quiet professionalism wrapped the space in warmth that felt nothing like the stiff, buttoned-up corporate rooms she'd known before. There were no fake smiles here. Just soft conversations, clean design, and a welcome desk where someone greeted her by name. Ben met her by the window wall of the main conference room. He was already smiling, a mug in one hand and a folder tucked beneath his arm. You came, he said simply, as if this was just lunch with a friend and not the most significant conversation she'd had in years. Couldn't let your mystery opportunity go unexplored, Rachel replied, tucking her nerves away behind a tight smile. Inside, the room overlooked the city. Early March sun catching rooftops still frosted from the morning. Rachel let her eyes settle on the horizon for a moment before turning her attention to the table where two others waited. HR, she assumed. One introduced herself as Keisha, the other as Tom. No buzzwords, no corporate theater. Just firm handshakes and curious eyes. Ben leaned forward first. "We've seen your work," he said, placing her blog printouts in the center of the table. Not just the posts, but the tone, the restraint, the way you build tension without making it melodramatic. Rachel blinked. "You mean the posts where I didn't mention any names?" "Exactly," Tom added. "You gave us enough to feel something without turning it into spectacle. That's rare." Keisha nodded. "And more relevant than ever." They asked her questions about content frameworks, strategy mapping, narrative ownership, topics she could have answered in her sleep. But when the conversation shifted, "Tell us about your support system," Ben prompted. Rachel hesitated. She felt the old reflex tighten in her throat, the urge to package something tidy, palatable. But she didn't. "I created my own foundation," she said instead, piece by piece, with truth and silence and a lot of boundaries. Ben's eyes didn't waver. "That's exactly why we want you." A pause lingered, thick and unreal. Keisha smiled gently. "Would you like the formalities or the truth?" Rachel tilted her head. "The truth," Keisha said, "is that we'd be lucky to have you. And if you want it, the job's yours." Rachel didn't speak right away. She blinked, unsure if she'd heard it correctly. Then she felt it. Not shock, not even joy. Just this slow, quiet sense of alignment. A puzzle piece finally snapping into place after years of trying to jam herself into the wrong board. "Thank you," she said. "Yes, I'd love that." Ben reached across the table and shook her hand. "Welcome aboard, Rachel." When she stepped out of the building into the crisp spring air, the city buzzed a little louder, a little clearer. Everything felt sharper. The street smelled like warm bagels and new beginnings. She fished her phone from her purse and typed without overthinking. "Rachel, I think I just walked into my real life." She hit send. Then she let the sun hit her face for a while longer before walking toward whatever came next. ChatGPT. Janoi. Toi. Tong ingi. Nha la mo noa toi roa ji. Turns out it's a life I'm walking towards. The office was quiet that morning, filled with the soft clatter of keyboards and the scent of fresh brewed coffee. Rachel stepped through the glass doors, her ID badge now clipped with quiet pride to her blazer. The place still felt slightly unreal. Too kind, too curious, too free of landmines. But she didn't shrink from it anymore. She let herself take up space. Her desk had a clean setup, dual monitors, a small potted plant from HR, and a framed welcome card that read, "You belong here." Simple words, but they had weight, and they settled into the ache behind her ribs like warmth. She was already halfway through editing a team draft when Claire appeared. Quietly, unexpectedly, with a bouquet of daffodils in one hand and a takeaway coffee in the other. "Just because," Claire said, setting them down next to the plant. "First full week. You made it." Rachel blinked, unsure whether to laugh or cry. "Thank you," she whispered, brushing her fingers across the yellow petals. Coworkers passed with brief smiles, nods, and no questions that probed too deep. They saw a woman doing her job well. That was enough. By lunch, Rachel had already outlined her first company blog post, a personal editorial titled "The Price of Silence." It wasn't a tell-all. It was a reflection. A piece about the cost of being agreeable, of mistaking sacrifice for safety, of losing your voice in the name of keeping the peace. Ben skimmed the draft that afternoon and looked up slowly. "This is fire," he said. "But more than that, it's generous. Thank you for sharing it." Rachel swallowed a lump in her throat. Thanks for letting me. When she stepped outside that evening, the air smelled faintly of blossoms. Early spring had arrived, unbothered by anything that came before. Claire was waiting at the edge of the sidewalk, holding Rachel's coat like it was a ritual they'd long rehearsed. They walked without destination, passing parks, corner cafes, small dogs in jackets. The city buzzed in soft background noise. Laughter, wind chimes, a car radio playing something old and hopeful. "You're quiet," Claire said, brushing her hand against Rachel's. "I'm not used to the quiet feeling good," Rachel replied. "But this kind? I could get used to it." Claire didn't press further. She simply tightened her grip and kept walking beside her. At home, after a dinner that tasted more like laughter than food, Rachel stood in front of the mirror in their shared bathroom. The light was gentle. Her reflection was still catching up to the woman she'd become. But when she looked into her own eyes, she didn't flinch. "This version of me?" she whispered. "I'd fight for her." The words didn't need to be loud. They just needed to be true. She turned off the light, ready for bed, when the mail caught her eye. Claire had tossed it on the side table earlier. A few bills, a grocery flyer, and one small envelope without a return address. Handwritten. Familiar. Rachel picked it up slowly. Postmarked from her childhood home. She didn't open it. Not yet. She just held it in her hand as the apartment settled into silence. Not dread. Just possibility. ChatGPT. Janoi. Under the pale blush of morning light, the envelope sat where she'd left it. Quiet, unobtrusive, and charged like a live wire. Rachel stared at it from across the kitchen table, her hands wrapped around a warm mug that had long since stopped steaming. The address was written in Janice's familiar cursive, slightly tilted, too carefully neat, as if trying to soften the blow of whatever was inside. It wasn't the first time Rachel had received a letter from them, but it was the first one she hadn't wanted anything from. She picked it up and turned it over in her hands. Claire hadn't asked about it yet, though Rachel knew she'd noticed. Her partner always had a way of waiting until Rachel was ready. And maybe this morning, soft, slow, unpressured, was as ready as she'd ever be. Rachel slid a butter knife under the seal and cracked it open. The paper inside smelled faintly of perfume. Her mother's signature scent, cloying lavender and guilt. The letter was 2 pages, front and back, each sentence as carefully balanced as the handwriting itself. "We've been thinking about you a lot lately. The house feels quieter without you. Remember that time on your 12th birthday when your dad made those awful pancakes and you still smiled through every bite? You always knew how to make things better." Rachel's fingers tightened slightly. "We know things have been tense. Maybe we all said things we didn't mean, but family doesn't give up on each other. Not real family." She kept reading. "We still have your room. Still set just the way you left it. If you ever want to come back, not just to the house, but to us, we're here. We've always been here." And then, like a signature hidden in the folds of fine print, "It's not about the money, sweetheart. It never was. But we hope you remember who was there when you had nothing." Rachel placed the letter on the table, flat and centered. She read it again, slower. The nostalgia clung to her skin like a humid breeze. Thick, hard to shake. But the words didn't pierce. Not this time. They floated above her like old wallpaper, peeling at the edges, revealing the same cracked wall underneath. She reached for her water glass, still 3/4 full. Quietly, deliberately, she set it down directly on top of the letter. The paper began to drink. Ink bled like bruises through cotton, soft at first, then spiraling into swirls. Her name vanished first. She didn't look away. Claire came into the kitchen, her hair still damp from the shower. She caught the scene in a heartbeat. "You okay?" she asked gently, leaning against the counter. Rachel nodded, her eyes never leaving the slow destruction of cursive and lavender. "Want to talk about it?" Rachel took a breath, exhaled. "No need," she said. "I've already spoken by living." Claire crossed the room and pressed a kiss to Rachel's temple. They stood in silence as the last word on the page drowned. Rachel picked up the soggy pages by the corner and walked them to the trash can. No ceremony, no rage, just closure in its quietest form. The lid dropped shut with a soft click. Back at the table, she opened her laptop. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. Then she began to type, "What we owe and what we don't." The title sat bold on the blank screen, daring her to continue. And she did. Not for them. Not for vindication. But because silence wasn't healing anymore. It was a page she'd finally outgrown. They'll never apologize. And that's finally okay. Because now I don't need it to be free. The cafe was quiet, save for the faint hum of milk steaming and the occasional clink of a teaspoon against porcelain. Rachel sat by the tall window, hands wrapped around a warm cup of coffee. The early morning mist curled outside like a memory she hadn't invited but wasn't quite ready to send away. She had barely slept the night before. Not because of nerves. Those had faded. It was something else. Something deeper. A quiet, reverent stillness inside her that refused to be interrupted. For once, she wasn't waiting for a reply, a validation, or a disguised accusation. Claire arrived with 2 almond croissants, sliding one across the table. "I checked," she said with a sly smile. Still nothing from Janice or David. Rachel chuckled softly. "I don't think I expected anything." Claire raised a brow. "Really?" Rachel took a sip of her coffee, letting the bitterness rest on her tongue. Not really, but maybe. That's the point." They sat in silence, watching the city wake. Rachel's fingers hovered above her phone screen. The essay draft had been sitting in her notes app for over a week. She had polished every word, questioned every paragraph, rewritten the ending twice. But now, it was ready. What we owe and what we don't. She hit publish. Nothing exploded. No sirens, no alarms, no sudden rush of emotion. Just the soft whoosh of the post going live and the faint buzz of the espresso machine behind her. "Done?" Claire asked. Rachel nodded, setting her phone face down. "Done." Within 10 minutes, the post had over 30 likes. By 30 minutes, it had over 100. Comments started trickling in. One woman wrote, "I've never read something that made me feel so seen. You put into words what I never dared to say." "Thank you." A man added, "My sister sent me this. Now I know why she stopped coming to Sunday dinner. I'm sorry I didn't ask sooner." Rachel wiped her eyes before the tears could fall too far. She wasn't sad. She wasn't angry. She was something new. Something light. Claire reached across the table, took her hand, and gave it a gentle squeeze. "Look at the difference you made, just by choosing you." Rachel nodded slowly, her voice barely above a whisper. "They didn't bless me, Claire, but you did, and so did I." She hadn't expected closure to feel so quiet. No applause, no dramatic confrontation. Just the warmth of a blanket Claire wrapped around her shoulders, the glow from strangers saying thank you, and the coffee that stayed warm longer than it should have. For years, she had imagined a final showdown. Words shouted across a dinner table, secrets exposed in front of an audience, slamming doors. But in this new life, there were no slams. Just soft openings. And softer landings. She looked up, eyes meeting Claire's. "So, how about celebrating?" Claire's smile deepened, playful and proud. "I thought you'd never ask." They stepped out into the chill, arm in arm, Rachel pulling the scarf tighter around her neck. Not as armor, but as comfort. Not against them, but for her. This wasn't about winning, it was about reclaiming. This time I didn't bring a gift. I received one I never expected. A life that fits. Rachel wasn't sure why Claire had insisted she wear the blue sweater. The one she claimed brought out her eyes. But she'd learned by now not to argue over details when Claire had that look in her eye. The house was warm, humming with quiet excitement and the scent of cinnamon and baked fruit. Outside, late March lingered in that delicate space between spring and memory, sun dappling the porch in patches. She stepped into the living room and stopped short. Surprise! Claire stood in the center, flanked by Ellie, Aunt Martha, Ben, and half a dozen other familiar smiling faces. A banner hung crookedly from the ceiling. Just because. Rachel blinked. Her hand instinctively reached for her chest. Ben grinned. Claire told us not to call it a party, so technically this is an extremely enthusiastic hangout. Ellie handed her a cupcake with a single candle jammed in. It's not your birthday, but it felt wrong not to celebrate you. Rachel looked around the room. Laughter bounced easily between guests. No one was tracking favors. No one was calculating debt. No one asked what she brought. She hadn't brought anything. Claire stepped forward, holding a small rectangular frame wrapped in tissue paper. Open it. Rachel peeled back the layers carefully, and there it was. A photo of her from weeks ago at the family cabin, mid-laugh, a wool scarf around her neck. Her eyes almost closed from joy. Below the photo, printed in delicate script, "From the day you belonged." Rachel's throat closed. She looked at Claire, at everyone, then back down at the photo again. Her voice, when it came, was soft and shaking. No one's ever made me feel chosen. Aunt Martha touched her arm. Then it's about time someone did. The evening unfurled with stories and songs, clinking glasses and accidental harmonies. Someone burned the pie crust, but no one cared. Rachel helped Ellie relight the fairy lights when a fuse blew. Ben played a too-loud playlist from his phone until Claire mock-threatened to throw it into the sink. Later, with cheeks flushed and the weight of something beautiful pressing gently against her chest, Rachel stood. She clinked her glass, clearing her throat. "Can I say something?" The room quieted, but no one stiffened. There was no tension here, no undercurrent. "To the ones who found me when I was lost," she began, her voice steady, "even when I didn't ask to be found." She raised her glass. "To belonging that doesn't come with a receipt." A soft chorus of cheers followed, and Claire leaned in, slipping her hand into Rachel's. "You did good," Claire murmured. "I didn't do anything," Rachel whispered back. "You chose yourself," Claire said. "That's everything." They sat together as the evening slowed. Rachel rested her head on Claire's shoulder, the framed photo balanced in her lap like something sacred. Around them, stories overlapped, old jokes returned, and no one mentioned what had come before. It was enough. Later, as coats were gathered and leftovers packed away, Claire brushed a curl behind Rachel's ear. "Ready to plan spring break?" Rachel smiled, the kind of smile that reached the places once hollow. "Only if it's somewhere I don't owe anyone anything." Claire raised an eyebrow. "That's a pretty high bar." Rachel laughed. "Then it'll have to be somewhere I bring nothing but myself." The door closed behind the last guest. Rachel stood still for a moment, letting the silence wrap around her like the photo's caption had. Not closure, but arrival. She hadn't brought a gift this time. She had become one. She walked through fire not to prove her worth, but to burn down the illusion that she ever had to. When guilt lost its grip and silence stopped buying peace, she chose a life built on truth instead of transactions. Like the final chord of a long-forgotten melody, justice may arrive late, but it resonates powerfully once it's heard. No wall of lies can stand forever against the tide of truth. If you felt seen by this story, like, share, and comment your thoughts below. Type 1 if you relate. Type 2 if you're still waiting for your own ending.